auditorium today for the 25th SP Ray-Chaudhuri Memorial Lecture. And what I would like to say is your presence not only honors the legacy of Professor Ray-Chaudhuri sir, but it also shows the dedication towards uh, intellectual discourse, the continuation of intellectual discourse. And it is, I feel it's an honor for me to stand before you and start today's proceedings. So I welcome our chief guest, Professor S.N. Thakur sir, the former Dean, Faculty of Science, esteemed speaker for the memorial lecture today, Professor Raman Sukumar. He's a national chair for ecological conservation, ISC Bangalore. Professor Rajiv Raman, President of SP Ray-Chaudhuri Memorial Foundation, and Dr. Gaurav Kumar Pandey is the treasurer for SP Ray-Chaudhuri Memorial Foundation. So to begin with, in BHU we start all the events, all the programs by reciting the Kul Geet. And though we all know, but I feel very honored when I say that this Kul Geet was written by Professor Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar, who we all know is, in whose name the highest scientific award is instituted in India. Not only that, apart from that, he was one of the faculty members, he was a professor in the Department of Chemistry. So to recite the Kul Geet, I request the students, Olivia, Tanvi, Amrita, Shikhardeep, and Abhijit to please come and recite the Kul Geet.
मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्व वेद्या की राजधानी राजधानी मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्व वेद्या की राजधानी राजधानी ये तीनों लोकों से न्यारी काशी सुज्ञान धर्म और सत्य राशि बसी है गंगा के रम्य तट पर ये सर्व विद्या की राजधानी राजधानी नए नहीं है ये ईंट पत्थर है विश्वकर्मा का कार्य सुंदर रचे है विद्या के भव्य मंदिर ये सर्व सृष्टि की राजधानी राजधानी यहाँ की है ये पवित्र शिक्षा के सत्य पहले फिर आत्मरक्षा बीके हरिश्चंद्र थे यहीं पर ये सत्य शिक्षा की राजधानी राजधानी वेद ईश्वर की सत्यवाणी बने जिन्हें पढ़ के ब्रह्म ज्ञानी थे व्यास जी ने रचे यहीं पर ये ब्रह्म वेद्या की राजधानी राजधानी व मुक्ति पद को दिलाने वाले सुधर्म पथ पर चलाने वाले यही फले फूले बुद्ध शंकर ये राज ऋषियों की राजधानी राजधानी सुरम्य धाराए वरुणासी नहाए जिनमें कबीर तुलसी भला हो कविता का क्यों ना कर ये वाग वेद्या की राजधानी राजधानी विविध कला अर्थ शास्त्र गायन गणित खनिज औषधि रसायन प्रतीचि प्राची का मेल सुंदर, ये विश्वविद्या की राजधानी, राजधानी। ये मालवीय जी की देशभक्ति, ये उनका साहस, ये उनकी शक्ति। ये मालवीय जी की देशभक्ति, ये उनका साहस, ये उनकी शक्ति। प्रकट हुई है नवीन होकर, ये कर्मवीरों की राजधानी, राजधानी। मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर, ये सर्व विद्या की राजधानी, राजधानी। मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर, ये सर्व विद्या की राजधानी, राजधानी।
Thank you. And now I request our students to formally welcome our chief guest, Vanshika, Professor S.N. Thakur sir, by giving a floral bouquet. And now I request Sanchari to present the floral bouquet to Professor Raman Sukumar. I request now Professor Rajiv Raman to deliberate on the S.P. Ray-Chaudhuri Memorial Lecture, which is a very dear, these lecture series are very dear to us, and Professor Raman would like to talk about it.
Professor Thakur, the chief guest for this evening, and Professor Raman Sukumar, the most exalted speaker for this evening, Madhu and Gaurav and dear friends, I can see and feel very elated to have seen even my classmate from 1969 batch of FNASc Professor V.K. Maudgil here, and respected friends, students, colleagues, and dear friends. Well, I consider it a singular privilege to be able to stand here and to welcome you on the 25th Prof.S.P. Ray-Chaudhuri Memorial Lecture. 25th would mean something like Silver Jubilee for these lectures. And that, to me, looks like a tribute to the erudite speakers that we always have for all these years. They have come and given us knowledge of the highest level. And also to you, gentlemen and ladies, who make these lectures possible, because you come and you insist upon it. Actually, many, many times we have been able to do this because we have been reminded again and again why this year's lecture has not yet been done. That shows your interest, and that makes us gratified. Actually, I'm very happy to see two in the audience, one of whom once told her mother that why it is that only men give the speakers, are the speakers of this memorial lecture. The first 20 lectures were given by men. And therefore, in honor, I'm glad that she is here to see that the last 4 lectures in succession were given with very exalted, learned ladies, lady scientists of this country. Lest you say that we were feminists, we have come back to gentlemanly role. And this year we have a gentleman to give us the lecture. So thank you for telling us that we should do something better. So it is actually a privilege. And of course, this is a homage to a teacher who was a teacher. I mean, you don't become a teacher just because you teach. But that's many of us sitting in this room do. You become a teacher because you live teacherhood. I do not know whether there is a word teacherhood or not, but I believe that Professor Ray-Chaudhuri was one of those who lived teacher's life, who did not only give us lectures, and many of us, there are not many, I think there are very few of us who are here who have heard his classroom lectures. At least 4 of us are here, who know that he was teacher par excellence. You wouldn't get a better teacher, so lucid, so involved. But he was far beyond that, a visionary who made it sure that zoology doesn't remain a post-mortem, formalin fixed subject. It's a dynamic subject, a living subject, and that's what he made sure, along with others, of course, he was not alone in the country, to see that life sciences or zoology gets life sciences and gets life. And that's why when we honor him, when we respect him, when we think of him, we think of a man of that caliber. But he was even more than this. He was a person who wanted, and as you may imagine, he was one of those who did a PhD with Herman Joseph Muller, and then came to India, did not find it easy to start genetics because there were no air-conditioned laboratories. And with the help of J.V.S. Haldane, they could set up a laboratory in Calcutta, came here and started research and started many more things. To do a high-grade research and to make science popular, to make science everybody's realm. And what do you mean when you say you make science everybody's realm? What I mean is, and what he would have meant would be to be logical, to be questioning, not to take facts as they come, but to ask whether they are really the facts, because the facts are also very dynamic. I mean, we use a term, a scientific temper, a Nehruvian term, a scientific temper. So growth of scientific temper was one additional factor that he loved very much. What we are trying to do, his students and his friends and his colleagues and his family and others, is to try to bring that scientific temper, to spread that scientific temper through this foundation. I'm glad that we are able to attract you to these lectures. We do small other activities too. Last year in August, we had another function where we were a part of we sponsored a workshop on medical diagnostics and hematological disorders. Next month, we want to do a workshop on different biological systems to work upon for deep teaching and research. These are small activities that we do, but we're able to do that because we feel we owe it to him, a teacher who gave his life and thoughts and everything for the growth of science of this country. I'm grateful to you all for coming, and hearty welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And as sir said, that many in the audience have been coming year after year for these lecture series. And I would just like to mention that yesterday evening I met Jaiswal madam and Sanjana at the airport. And the first thing they told me was, we are coming for the lecture tomorrow. So it was on the mind that they received the invitation and they had to come to this lecture series. So today we have Professor Raman Sukumar as our 25th, delivering the 25th S.P. Ray-Chaudhuri Memorial Lecture. Professor Raman Sukumar, he has contributed immensely to the ecology and the behavior and conservation of Asian elephants. He's a member of all the academies in India, and he has received many awards. But I would especially like to mention one award which he received, and that was the International Cosmos Prize at Japan in 2006. He was a key player, or he mediated as a key member for the Nilgiri Bioreserve in 1986. So it was since then that he has been working in how the maintenance of Asian elephants and the interaction with humans and all other the different varied aspects of this. And in the Prime Minister, also he is a member of, he is serving as a vice chair of the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, and he's serving this, and he'll be serving at the United Nations till 2030. So this makes us very proud of, we take a lot of pride in having you, sir, as a speaker. And while going through the net, while surfing to the internet, I came across several pictures of Professor Raman with elephants, and it was as if the elephants were talking to him, and he was able to understand the language. So that you could sense that feeling that yes, there's something, some interaction, some love that's going on between the elephants and sir. And his love for the wildlife was since his very childhood, as his grandmother used to call him or nicknamed his as Vanvasi, that's forest dweller. So we are very happy to know that you are amongst us. And as we say in India, the child, you can understand what the future of the child is when he's in the cradle. So probably his family understood what he's going to be when he grows up. And apart from a scientific deliberation, sir, I think the audience would love to hear if there are certain anecdotes which may send a chill down the spine when your interaction with elephants and in the forest, that live image, if you could tell some stories, it would be very nice. So with these words, I request Professor Raman Sukumar to start his talk.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm not sure if I'm capable of sending a chill down the spines of the audience, and very sedate, quite kind of a person. Unlike many of my friends who study carnivorous animals, who are much more fierce than I am. Professor Thakur, my colleague and a long-term friend in many scientific committees, Professor Kotia is here. Professor Tapadia, Professor Raman, Dr. Pandey, teachers, students, friends, and others whom have come to listen to this lecture. I'm deeply honored to have the opportunity to deliver the 25th Professor S.P. Ray-Chaudhuri Memorial Lecture. Professor S.P. Ray-Chaudhuri is a great scientist and visionary, and the pioneer in studies on animal cytogenetics, which later became molecular genetics, of course, transitioned into that in the country. And I could immediately make a connect because during my master's, I actually specialized in cytogenetics. And it wasn't plant cytogenetics because I did a master's in botany and not in zoology. And I'll also be speaking tomorrow at another symposium in the botany department. So I wear these different hats. And in fact, at one time, I was deliberating as to whether I should do genetics or should I do something else. And I may very well have gone into the field of cytogenetics and eventually molecular genetics. But at a crucial stage, I decided that ecology was somewhat more interesting, that at a young age, I should go out into the field and I should work in the field. And later on in life, I could always catch up with work in the laboratory. I grow old and perhaps more feeble and not being able to go out to the field and so on. Therefore, I did have an opportunity later on to actually bring in genetics into the studies of the Asian elephant. I'm going to keep my talk fairly general today because I understand that the audience is quite a broad audience, and I will not bore you with too much of technical details, but at the end I'll be very happy to answer any kind of a scientific question that you may have. I'll put up a few figures and so on. So this elephant in West Bengal kind of typifies the, I would say, sometimes humorous, sometimes fearsome interaction between elephants and people. This is a wild elephant. This is a tuskless male elephant that we call a Mahamana. This elephant is in full mast. It's a Urdu term for madness. You can see the You can see a kind of a, something streaming from the cheek, down the cheek of this elephant. It comes into this condition typically about once a year or maybe twice a year. This condition lasts for a few weeks. And during this time, the male elephant is extremely aggressive. And he has dominance over other males. A whole lot of other physiological changes, behavioral changes take place. But in this particular instance, this elephant has stopped a bus on the main road between Siliguri and Hashimara, those who know that particular road. And he stopped a bus and he's trying to look for all the passengers who got down and walked away. Fortunately, nothing happened to any of them. He's trying to ransack the bus. He's trying to extract food, any food that the people are carrying. So this, in some sense, has a very peaceful ending, but it does not always happen that way. This kind of typifies the nature of the interaction. Change here itself, right? Okay. Now, when we talk about Asian elephants, we usually use the term keystone species. The Asian elephant is a keystone species in the tropical forests of Asia. So a keystone species is one that makes a very big impact. It pushes down trees, it feeds on a lot of vegetation, it digs holes in the dry stream bed that, to take water, and other animals come and are able to take advantage and, drink from that during periods of drought. The branches that the elephant pulls down, the leaves are eaten by other animals which will not get access to the leaves so high up in the branches of a tree. It disperses a lot of fruits and seeds, and many fruits and seeds are most successfully eaten, modified for better germination, transported, and deposited in a different location. So the elephant helps to regenerate the tropical forest. At the same time, the Asian elephant is also a creature of grassland. You go to Kaziranga in Assam, or you go to Corbett and you look at these grasslands, or Sri Lanka. This picture was taken in Sri Lanka. You have a forest in the background. In the foreground, you see a grassland, and you see a very large herd of elephant. They come and spend several hours feeding on grass. And this duality in feeding makes it sometimes very difficult for us to know whether the elephant is the creature of the forest or the grassland. It's one that almost like the proverbial chameleon, it goes on changing its behavior, and it can adapt to both a forest and to a grassland, which has a very important bearing on the nature of conflict with people, over agriculture and so on, which again I will come to this lecture. Now, when you look at, this is the next one. When you look at the range of the Asian elephant, it had a very wide range from the Tigris-Euphrates River. It's about 6,000 years ago, down through southern Iran, Pakistan, into Indian subcontinent, into Southeast Asia, and even, up to northern China. But today, the green patches that you see are all that remains in terms of the habitat. And I think approximately 3% of the original habitat of the range of the original habitat of the Asian elephant remains today. And we have about 50,000 wild elephants, about 15,000 in captivity, but they don't contribute directly to any role in the ecosystem functioning. Out of which India hosts 60%, that is 30,000 elephants in the wild. So India is a very important country for the long-term survival of the species. Now, this again, I'm taking you back to the town of Siliguri in West Bengal. And this is another tuskless male Mahamana. This is a wild elephant. This is near a shopping mall in Siliguri some years ago. And CNN report very colorfully called this elephant throws rickshaws and motorcycles during Hindu festival in India. I'm not sure if the elephant paid attention to a Hindu festival. I'm sure it would have done the same thing for an Islamic or a Christian festival. Although you don't know, maybe he recognized that day was a Hindu festival. We never know the intelligence of the elephant. But nevertheless, he's playing football with all the cycles and the motorcycles. The elephant was darted and safely taken back into the forest. A very happy ending at the end of the day. But on the other hand, we know that conflicts between elephants and people are escalating. And you can see that in the amount of crop, agricultural crop that is damaged by wild elephants. The damage itself is worth crores of rupees each year. And in India, last year, 630 people were killed by wild elephant, 630. When I started my research on elephants in 1980, 81, I computed data on people killed by wild elephants. It was 125. So it's more than fourfold today. It's almost fivefold. I would say fivefold increase in the level of conflict when it comes to the number of people getting killed. But on the other hand, if you look at the agricultural crop damage, it's probably even greater than that. This is only an index. And you can see this again in West Bengal, you see the elephant dung on a paddy field which has been completely flattened. Therefore, when we talk about conservation, most of us who live in cities, work in cities, make our livelihoods in cities, we should be mindful of the fact that there is somebody paying, common Indian farmer, very often sometimes tribals, living in forest areas or close to forest areas or increasingly even quite far away from the forest areas. They are paying the cost for us to conserve elephants, to maintain elephants in the country. And this is a very important aspect we need to keep firmly at the back of our mind before we make value judgments about how elephants should be saved, what is the nature of the conservation action that we should take, and so on and so forth. Because otherwise, there is always a risk that populist ideas, populist movements, social media activism, and so on start dictating the nature of how do you resolve conflicts, how do you minimize conflict. Because the vast majority of the costs being borne are by agricultural by farmers, and we need to keep that firmly at the back of our minds when we talk about conservation. Usually, I just flip over this very, very quickly, but this is the reality. On the bottom, you find a maize field has been flattened by elephant. The top left, you see a majority of hundreds of millions of Indians live in houses like that. And this is taken in Jharkhand about 10 or 15 years ago. This happens regularly. Even today, it happens. Every night it happens in Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh and many other states now. Elephants demolish the house, has come in to take rice from a pot. On the top right, you see a man being killed by wild elephant. At the same time, this interaction is a two-way interaction. Not only that people suffer, but also elephants suffer. And about 10% of all elephant deaths in the country are due to conflict. And this totals about 75 elephants plus each year in India alone. Many more in countries like Sri Lanka, where the numbers are much greater. There's an elephant that has been electrocuted when entering a farm. A farmer has taken the electricity from the mains and connected it to a fence around his farm, and the elephant has come. No, mostly for wild pig. They deliberately do not try to kill an elephant, but the elephant has made contact while coming into the farm in search of crops, and it has fallen victim. So it is in the best interests of both people and wildlife, elephant in this case, that we try to solve conflicts. And for this, we really need to understand the background or the basis, or the ecological basis of why we have conflicts. Why do elephants come and raid crops? Now, scenes like this are today become very common, which were not there, let's say 45 or 50 years ago. These kinds of scenes were not seen. And this is becoming increasingly common in, not only this is in South India, this is Chennai-Bangalore highway, elephants from Tamil Nadu going into Andhra. This is a phenomenon that started in 1983. They are going full scale across divided highways. And India, with our infrastructural development, we are now actually, more and more of these highways are coming in, not necessarily inside forest areas. And this is not actually going through any major forested area. The elephants have come out of the forest and they are traversing very large agricultural areas. Okay. So There are a lot of other challenges when we have railway lines and we have roads, and these are not, as I told you, they are not going through necessarily any major forested area. I think there is a problem in the mic signal. Is there a problem? Okay, it's a bit of an echo. You think, okay, doesn't matter. I'll just continue. Now, the first thing is to remember, I always like to go back in history a little bit. And to tell you that when you look at our ancient texts, we look at visual depiction of elephants and so on in art. You can glean something very important. It's not as though conflict is something very new. Always conflict has been there. This is a translation of the Gajasastra, which is elephant lore, going back to the 5th century BC. And Gajasastra is attributed to sage Palkapya, who's supposed to come from the Lohitya area of Assam, northeast. And he is wandering across the country. He's coming into. Maybe I should just speak directly into this. Yeah, I think this can be done. Or maybe this is on.
Okay, is that fine? Yeah, you can all hear me? So an evolutionary biologist would give you the explanation that male elephants in polygynous species have been selected for higher levels of aggression, because that's the way that they can propagate their genes. They can have dominance over other males and propagate their genes. And therefore, there has been selection for higher and higher levels of testosterone in the male of the species rather than the female of the species. That is ultimate causation. Now, the problem is, in the discourse on conservation, people talk about proximate cause. People never get into ultimate causation because half the people don't understand this concept at all. And sometimes it can lead to very different conclusions and wrong kind of assumptions when we talk about how to deal with conflict and how to manage these elephants that are in conflict. Habitat loss, fragmentation, degradation, land use patterns, adverse climate events. I'll give you an example of all of this. But at the same time, ultimate causation involves looking at optimal foraging, which is one of the central tenets of ecology. Principles of behavioral ecology, animal behavior, learning and culture in a highly intelligent species. We need to get into all of this to be able to understand. Now, loss of habitat is very simple. You take a forest, a rainforest, like the Southeast Asia taken in Sabah, in Borneo, many years ago, Danum Valley, what a wonderful forest you get. And then you cut it and replace it with oil palm. Oil palm is also food for the elephant. The elephant continues to range in the same land, the same area. I lost my house, but I've not really lost it because the land I've not lost. So I continue to come into the same area and feed on the oil palm instead of whatever other plants I get in the forest. So there is conflict, loss of habitat. Something like this is very obvious. It's not rocket science. You go to Jharkhand, you go to Odisha, central India, very high levels of conflict. You will find that mining has really created deep scars in the forest areas. They are fragmented. There's absolutely not a blade of grass that an animal can get, elephant or any other creature can get. And therefore, there is, it is inevitable that elephants will have to go somewhere else and they have to seek sufficient forage. Therefore, they will go and feed on the cultivated crops in the villages around. Other cases, you have loss of habitat, but not passages for the elephants. You get tea gardens in Northeast. You get tea gardens in the Western Ghats. You get coffee plantations. Elephants can move through them. Okay, so there is loss of habitat. They move through them. They still go through the valleys. They still get grass there. And in the tea gardens, they sometimes find grasses and other species, plants that they can feed upon. But there is conflict sometimes because with the people who are, working in the tea gardens, there can be conflict. You get dams and, in India, especially in the Western Ghats, we have large number of hydroelectric dams. Elephants can swim across these. So loss of habitat, but not. Then you get barriers like this. Now, barriers like this are actually becoming a major problem for elephants. Not just barriers like penstock pipes, but also roads and railway lines and so on. And that means the animals, these are real physical barriers the animals cannot cross, and therefore they have to take circuitous routes. So these are very, very obvious that they will cause conflict. And fragmentation of habitat. Fragmentation of habitat is very simple to visualize. You have a very compact forest area. You break it up into small, small chunks. Okay, now the animal has to move from one patch to another patch. It can't make a living within one patch. And, it just walks for a short distance or a short time. It encounters agriculture, it encounters cultivation, and therefore it rates crops. So this is just a conflict incidence in one particular district in Karnataka, where you actually find that the highest levels of conflict as seen by the Regd is actually outside the forest area, not inside the forest area. Okay, so here you see the very, very high levels of conflict. The forests are all here, and it's outside the forest area. That's where the conflict, because of high levels of fragmentation. Very important point. I told you that conflict has increased fourfold or fivefold since I started my research 45 years ago. Now, between 1981 and the present, if you look at human population, India's population has doubled from 700 million to 1,400 million. The elephant population has doubled from 15,000 to 30,000. 2 into 2 is equal to 4. So just by chance alone, the frequency of interaction has quadrupled. Twice the number of people, twice the number of elephants, 4 times the frequency of encounter, and 4 times the number of people getting killed. Okay. Again, there's no need for any great statistics or knowledge of mathematics or any fancy models or whatever. Just a simple fact. But it hides the fact that at a macro level, all India level, that's true. But there are a lot of regional differences. Everywhere it's not gone up 4-fold. Somewhere it is perhaps only doubled. Other areas it has gone up 10-fold for various reasons, like Central India, for instance, and so on. We need to understand all of this. But just a very simplistic, for our understanding, this is what happens. We all talk about climate change today. And climate change is a major driver, a very underappreciated driver of ecosystem processes, animal behavior, species responses, and so on. This is going to be one of the biggest challenges that we face when we are trying to conserve our biodiversity. Whether it is the tiny herbaceous plant or a tree growing near the Himalayan tree line presently, which will have to migrate to higher elevations, or elephants for that matter. I was in the field in 1982-83 when we had one of the most major droughts of the 20th century. It's called an El Nino phenomenon. Last 1 or 2 years, India has been somewhat fortunate in that we have had the opposite, the La Nina phenomena. It's a cooling of the Pacific Ocean. El Nino involves the heating of the Pacific, a part of the Pacific Ocean. When that happens, the Indian monsoon weakens. Typically, it weakens. In 1982-83, when I was out in the field doing my PhD work, it was a major, major drought. South India experienced 40 to 50% deficit in rainfall. That year, what happened? Immediately after that, the 83, I could not find the elephants anywhere. 2 years I had been following them in a certain region. They would come during the dry season. 83, I could not find them. I could not find them in that place at all. They're all gone somewhere. I had absolutely no technology, no way of knowing. Then we got the news that from a different forest division in Hosur, in the northern part of Tamil Nadu, elephants had marched off towards Andhra. Andhra Pradesh had not had wild elephants for 300 or 400 years. And these elephants now entered Andhra for the first time. The then Chief Minister said, yes, Lord Ganesha has come to our state. Let's accept Lord Ganesha. Receive. The problem was that people were not aware of the dangers of the elephant. They used to go and offer bananas to Lord Ganesha, and they used to get killed. A lot of crops were being damaged. It's a small herd of elephants, and many of us experts felt that the elephants will not settle down there. They will move on, But nevertheless, Andhra decided that they are going to keep the elephants. It has been largely a failure because the herds have scattered. Many of them have died out. You will hear regularly in the newspapers, there are more and more elephants going from Tamil Nadu into Andhra. And eventually they might reach the Tirupati hills, in which case they might be able to settle down there after another 2 decades or 3 decades or whatever. So next time you go to Tirupati and you want to climb up those 7 hills, be careful, you might encounter a wild elephant. Something similar happened in the late 80s in Jharkhand, when a herd of 50 elephants started going into South Bengal, Southern Bengal. Southern Bengal, traditionally, the last few hundred years, has not been habitat for wild elephants. And this picture is from that, very close to the city of Kolkata. It's almost come up to the Hooghly River, this particular herd after the harvest. Very, very intense conflict. Today, instead of 50, you have 200 elephants today. It's very, very intense conflict. So climate change is a trigger. You may have heard about China in the province of Yunnan. About 22 elephants, about a couple of years ago, they started wandering widely. They went very close to the town of Kunming. The BBC, all the international media tracked them. And there's a scientific paper which actually shows that a drying up, reduction in the rainfall in the habitat, in the natural habitat where the elephants were found, seemed to be the trigger for now driving these elephants out. So we are going to witness, with future climate change, we are going to witness more and more incidents of this, which then causes a huge amount of conflict. Now what happens to these elephants that leave the forests and go? They are wandering through agricultural areas. They are feeding on sugarcane and banana and other kinds of crops. The children have now forgotten, the young elephants have now forgotten what the natural forage is. Okay, just like the younger generation, I always joke, we still like to go and eat our idli or dosa or roti or whatever. But today, the younger generation, you people want to go to all kinds of Western restaurants and have pizza and pasta and all kinds of new kinds of foods, Good enough, I mean, good perhaps. But many of these young elephants have learned that they don't know what the original foods are. And therefore, they are unlikely to go back. Like, I'll just give you this herd. A herd of 7 elephants during that time went into the hills called Javadu Hills in Tamil Nadu, which has got about 4,000 square kilometers of forest. It's a huge forest area. Only 7 elephants. I always joke that this 7 elephants, 4,000 square kilometers in the Western Ghats, supports about 2,000 elephants. So potentially a habitat like this can support 2,000 elephants. It's got enough bamboo, forage, water, everything that the elephant needs. This should be the happiest elephant family in the world. It's got a huge kingdom, it's got a huge empire, right? But they were not happy. They were coming through agricultural areas. These are coconut trees, coconut farms. They were going through agricultural areas. They were coming onto the highways, stopping the trucks, and they were trying to ask for sugarcane or whatever other food that the people were carrying. This simply means that the feeding habits of these elephants had changed. This could be junk food that they are eating. This junk food could cause a lot of other health kind of issues for the elephants. But this is a kind of very, very tasty food. So there is something else driving these elephants. It is not only loss of habitat. It is not only degradation of habitat. It is not lack of natural forage inside the forest areas. Yes, if all that happens, definitely the animals will go out. But even when they have plenty of all of these resources, they are still going out. And this is where we need to start looking at ultimate causation. So the elephant is actually contrary to what you read in the papers the last 40 years. The range of the elephant has actually expanded greatly. It has expanded in southern India. It has expanded. All this yellow is all the expansions of the range. Northeast is a different situation. I'll not get into great amount of, but especially here, it has expanded greatly. Now from Jharkhand, elephants have gone to Madhya Pradesh, they've gone into Maharashtra. And even from Karnataka, elephants have gone into Maharashtra. From Tamil Nadu, elephants have gone into Andhra. Huge expansion of the range of the elephant. And this is driving a lot of conflict. So you need to look at foraging theory. And this was one of my early contributions, that elephants are raiding crops not just because they don't have enough food in the forest, but because in a certain period of time, they're able to get more forage per unit time that they spend. I found that an elephant in the forest, when they feed for 1 hour, they get about 6 hours of grass. They can eat 6 kg dry weight of grass per hour. When they come into the paddy field or the millet field, they can get 12 kilograms of 12 kg. So they need to eat only for half the time. And rest of the time, they can socialize, they can do other things in life, perhaps more interesting than just having to feed. So that is one. The second is that crops are more palatable, they are more tasty because they have lower levels of secondary compounds, tannins, and they're higher in protein and certain minerals. And this goes back to my PhD thesis. I'm very fond of putting up this slide. Wild grasses, cultivated grasses, protein, this is the protein range, when they go do crop raiding. So you see sodium, calcium, and all of this, they are kind of, much higher levels that they get from the cultivated field. So these crops are tasty. They are palatable. They provide higher amounts of nutrition. So why should if I bring a plate in front of you, whether it does good to you or not, I have plain bread and I have cake. What will you take? You will take the cake, no? Not the plain bread or the plain biscuit, right? So the same kind of a biology kind of drives these elephants to come out. It's very important to understand this because only then you can come up with proper management strategies to be able to control. Some elephants in a population will come out irrespective of what they have in the forest. And we have to be prepared for that. And it's not just the humans who are fond of alcohol, the elephants are extremely fond of alcohol. And, poor rural people in India, they make country-made liquor, whether it's Kerala or whether it is Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or whatever, they store them inside the houses. The elephants come and they just push over the buildings and, they attempt to, and they get drunk also sometimes and they kind of stagger in the forest and all that. And so, they dance in the forest and all that. All this happens. And food and salt. So, but this is the life for the common man in the country, for millions of people. Now you tell them, don't store food grain, don't store salt, don't make country-made liquor. With Mahua, that's a way of life for people. How can you change the livelihoods of and the way of life for tens of or billions of people? It's going to be very, very, very difficult. And where else will they go? Where else will they keep their harvested food grain? They have no other mechanism. So these are the realities for the farmers. Now, there is something else that is pulling the elephants out of the forest. This is called I call this the pull factor. With irrigation, with the dams, 50 or 60 years ago, farmers used to take one crop, rain-fed crop. Today, with irrigation canals all over all over the place, the farms have started greening. So you get more water, you get, farmers now take multiple crops in a given year. There's much more incentive now for the elephants to come out. Earlier, they would come and raid crops during 2 months, 3 months when Rabi or Kharif crop is harvested. Today, the perennial crops are there. Farmers take two. They're good for agricultural productivity, good for the economy of the country, good for the rural economy. But then also it increases conflicts. So conflict is a kind of a very complex suite of factors that increase the levels of conflict. Now, this is a science audience, so I'll attempt something slightly different. And this is something I wrote about this fairly recently in a paper on elephant evolution, proboscidean evolution overall. Now, there are 3 true elephants, in the elephant family. Only 3 true elephants. The first is the African elephant, Loxodonta, which is still there in Africa. Elephas maximus is the Asian elephant or Indian elephant, still alive. And Mammuthus is the mammoth, woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoth, as you know, became extinct about 4,000 years ago. Now, if you look at the teeth of these forms, this mammoth and the Asian elephant are adapted to a diet of grazing, because if you look at the teeth, you look at the number of lamellae that are there per molar. They are very thin lamellae, and the number of lamellae are far, far more, very closely spaced. You look at African elephant molar, they got few of these lamellae. They're broader molars, so they're fewer. Now, dental morphology, those who study know that these animals cannot graze to that extent. These animals are much more adapted to a grazing diet, which is very, feed on grass, it can be very abrasive on your teeth. So, if you look at the evolutionary history of the elephant, Asian elephant is adapted to grazing. But then what we have done through history is that we have pushed them all into the hills and the forests, where we have denied them the grass. They are able to feed on the trees and the shrubs. When you feed on the trees and the shrubs, that is called browsing. And I'll just put up one thing, please bear with me. And I'm sure there are students of botany here. C3 plants, C4 plants, photosynthesis. I'm sure that people are nodding their heads, they know. You find that through stable carbon isotopes, you can actually trace the diet of an animal, depending on the amount of 13 carbon, 12 carbon in the organic matter, or a protein like collagen, for instance. And I actually probably the first one to use stable carbon isotopes to apply it to the diet of an elephant globally, not only in India, but the first global study. And just as a lesson for the younger generation, Professor Lakoti and I were talking earlier today, about how science has changed, the nature of science has changed, our desire to publish in foreign journals, impact factors, and so on and so forth. It's kind of skewed our way of thinking, our way of doing science. At that time, I'm glad I did one thing. I find it very difficult to get my students to publish in current science today. Okay. When I got the initial results out of this work, the first thing I did is I sent it to current science. I got it published in '87. So today, if you do a Google search, the first application of stable carbon isotopes to diet of an elephant, either Africa or Asia, is my study. You got the priority. Okay, I got it to current science. And later on, when I had a larger sample size, I went to an international journal and I got it published. So it is just to tell you that, when you're doing science, it's sometimes very important for you. You have a new idea, you're trying to put it out. It doesn't matter. Go even for an India. Try to get it out into an Indian journal. Don't worry about impact factor for 1 or 2 papers. Do publish it internationally also. But this is just a small lesson or whatever I can advise, a piece of advice that I can give the young people here. Now, I mean, I don't want you to look at all of this in great detail, but just to tell you that when you do the carbon isotope ratios of African or Asian elephants, you will find that most of the diet of Asian elephants, in fact, in West Bengal, is mostly from browse, C3 plants, or maybe a mixed feeding, but never more than 50% grass in the diet of elephants. So what has happened is we have imposed a browsing diet. We have imposed a browsing diet on a grazing animal, adapted to grazing. And therefore, I can surmise that today, elephants are coming down from the hills when the crops are being harvested. They want that grass because their dental morphology, their evolutionary history is all geared towards a grazing diet. I mean, browse gives you more protein and so on and so forth. But this is one of the reasons. The next is something interesting, which again was one of my early contributions. I found that the male elephants are much more likely to go and raid crops compared to the female elephants. Females are much better behaved. It's the males, especially all these very young males, teenagers, just like, in our human society, that they try to do all kinds of tricks on the road and they behave in a very odd fashion, more aggressively, willing to take far more risks. Something very, very similar in elephant populations. And the explanation as to why male elephants took that's a risk taking, no? Because fellows who are riding those motorcycles on the road and doing all those kinds of stunts. I hardly see any women doing it. There might be the occasional woman who might do it. I'm not saying they don't, but it's more likely to be all these very young men trying to show off. And you are taking a risk. Elephant also, the male elephant is willing to take far greater risk in going and getting those resources. It can be shot by a farmer. It can be injured by a farmer. It can be electrocuted by a farmer. It can die. Far greater risk. In polygynous mammals, the reproductive success variance is much greater. If you take a female elephant, she starts reproducing at the age of about 15 years. Can go on until about 60. Every 5 years on average, let's say. So some 7 or 8 calves she will produce. Male elephants have to be in good body condition. They have to come into must very successfully. Only if they are in good body condition, they can do that. It needs very good nutrition to be able to come into must. In fact, all your captive elephants that we keep, the moment the male starts coming into must, what that mahout will do, he will remove all the food and he will start not giving sufficient food for it so that he can come out of must. Otherwise, it's very difficult to control those elephants. Okay, that's what they do. So, must the males have better chances of mating because the females also accept the must males to a greater extent for the purpose of mating. Therefore, selection has favored the evolution of a high-risk, high-gain strategy to enhance reproductive success. This has been shown after our early paper in animal behavior, myself and Professor Gadgil, 1988. Large number of studies in Africa and so on. This has been shown that this is true. That you need to understand intrinsic biological evolution to be able to understand conflicts. It gives you, and females, as I told you, associate with males and must, much more likely. Again, I had a student who did this study in the Northeast, where she showed that must is a primary determinant of reproductive success and male dominance. That's a completely different story and a set of papers that we did. Okay, this is a female elephant and probably in estrus in association with a big male, which is in must. And more recently, another student of mine has actually shown that I asked this quiz. I put up these 2 pictures as a quiz. Don't read the text. I say one of these 2 elephants is inside a national park, a protected area, very well protected. No people, nothing. It has got all the form. The other elephant is in an area which is outside the forest. And I ask the question, which is inside the forest in a protected area and which is outside the protected area. Typically, people will say that this is in the protected area and that is outside the protected area, right? Completely wrong. This is inside Bandipur National Park, Karnataka, Nagarhole, Bandipur, Mudumalai. This is where I do most of my work. This is in Hassan district, where these elephants are roaming in coffee plantations and feeding on agricultural crops. So you can straight away see, there's just one image. You can see the typical body condition, and this is typical. I mean, there are peer-published papers on this, showing the body condition of these elephants, which are ranging outside the protected areas, sanctuaries, national parks. Yes, we should keep all of that for protection. but the elephant outside is in much better body condition. And more than that, these levels of stress hormone, the stress hormones are based on glucocorticoid metabolites. Glucocorticoids are indicators of physiological stress. We measured them in the feces. We have assays for doing that. And we have shown that they are lower. This has a lower level of glucocorticoid when the elephant is feeding on the crops and is ranging outside. You will think the opposite, because this guy is being chased by farmers all the time. He's under stress all the time. This guy is calm. He's inside the protected area and he's not alarmed by anybody. He's not chased by anybody or whatever. But the opposite is true. So the superior nutrition that they are getting seems to compensate for any additional stress they may undergo. Except in very extreme conditions, we have a paper in review where in central India, in South Bengal, they use fireballs and they go and chase these elephants. And they sometimes throw it at them. Such conditions, they are under very, very high stress levels. But apart from that, normal crop raiding, a certain level of stress, superior nutrition they get from the crops. So this is biological thing is very important. And this is something very interesting, role of learning and culture. Now, elephant being a very intelligent creature, much of the behavior is learned behavior. It's not, it's not there at birth. They learn from their peers. They learn from the mother. They learn from their peers, and so on and so forth. Sons learn from, other family members, whether to raid crops or not to raid crops. The daughters also learn. So daughters, when they go and set their own families, they probably will continue the same habit they have learned when they're growing up in their family of going and raiding crops. The sons do something very interesting. When they're about 10 or 15 years of age, they will be sent out of the family. They are called male dispersal. Because otherwise, they'll be mating with their own close relatives, which is very bad inbreeding depression, all that as biologists, as an avoidance for inbreeding. Now, what these males do is, they form all male groups. And these all male groups now, as these males are going into agricultural areas, it's a paper we published it's a novel strategy in human areas. I'll just show this to you. The dietary choice influences social organization of the males. The male social organization is being shaped by the amount of food available in the agricultural areas. So this is 3 associating raiding bulls and cultural transmission of behavior. So you have the student, you have the postdoc, and you have the professor. It's a small classroom. The postdoc is admonishing the professor is quite calm. And this is a very huge makana actually. And there is a postdoc, this is a very young male. The postdoc seems to be admonishing the student. And so much of learning is happening within male elephant society. There are these very interesting dominance hierarchies, the whole learning process that happens. And once when you remove the professor, then things go haywire because they don't know where to go and where to learn. Sometimes they go and kill people and so on. So there are a whole lot of other management implications for that. Now what's happening? These classrooms are becoming larger and larger. All male group, all males. I had never seen this 40 or 50 years ago. I'd seen 3 or 4 at the time. Now this has gone to, this is about 12 or so, 17, 20, 25, all males found entirely in agricultural areas. In this, what happens, only the biggest males, when they have enough nutrition, they come into must, they go back to the forest for the sake of reproduction. 6 months back. The young males, for years on end, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and we have been following these individually in the area very close to Bangalore, between Bangalore and Mysore. They have not seen a female elephant. They have not seen an elephant family. They are only in the crop fields and they are only eating and fattening up. One day they may follow a big male and perhaps go back. For many years they don't. So all these very interesting changes are happening. These are all coconut as you see. And what these males do during the daytime to avoid the farmers, they'll just come into the water and just take refuge in the center of the lake. So no farmer can do anything. So the habits, the behavioral things are completely changing. During the night, they go out and raid crops. During the daytime, they just come and take refuge in the center of the lake. No other activity. So just like our IT professionals now, in the night, they are very, very active. They go for duty in the night and then come back home and sleep during the daytime. The only difference is that They're also sleeping in a sense, and they're in the middle of the lake. So, the wonderful adaptation to survival in a, human-dominated landscape. Very briefly, I'll just tell you what do we do in terms of management, mitigation. We have tried various things and we are largely failed, frankly, I'll tell you. Very, very challenging kind of situations. You can, and I'll just give you examples of this. Chasing elephants, most common thing that people have done through human history. Not always very effective. The chaser can become the chased, okay? You see this female, this is a classic picture, I'll tell you, taken near Bangalore, near Hosur. These farmers are trying to chase them away from the fields, the herd. You see this female with the ear out. The ears are out. That is a warning sign. That is a warning sign. If you see in the forest, you see an elephant spreading its ears out and then warily, looking at you, you better retreat as soon as possible. Otherwise, you might end up getting hunted. So you can see, and they'll chase and people get killed. So chasing is not effective. Wildlife barriers, elephant-proof trench. For 30 years, I never believed that an elephant can cross ditches like this. They can perform circus tricks, feats. I saw Kerala. This is a Malayali elephant in Wayanad. Bengali and Kerala elephants are very special in many ways. And this is in Wayanad. You just see the kind of agility of this elephant and how it climbs. Even with all my knowledge of elephants, I never thought the anatomy of the elephant is conducive or will allow it to clamber upward just like this. But it is doing it. So they are going to desperate lengths to come out of the forest to go and get those crops. Not because they don't have enough food in the forest, but the crops outside are tastier. Your neighbor's lawn is greener than your lawn. So that's the kind of situation that actually arises. We try electric fencing. This is in Wayanad again, village in Wayanad Sanctuary. You hear a lot about that. When people take some responsibility, we gave them the materials. They did it. They looked after it very well. 3 years, it was very good. Then Manrega scheme came. And Manrega said, okay, we should do something, give money to people, let them do something. They dug a ditch outside this. The water started filling it up. This fence was neglected. The ditch, elephants can easily cross and go. So the whole experiment failed after 3 years. So multiple agencies coming and acting, and elephants can overcome technology. Master physicist. Now, let me see if this video plays. There's a bull called Ranga who's no more, very close to Bandarghatta. Oh, sorry, it's not playing on this. It's not playing. You will see if this video plays. The elephant knows that the soles of the feet are poor conductors. They know that the tusks are poor conductors. They use the tusks and the soles of the feet to, on the electric fence to remove it or to break it and then go cross over. And the female elephants are also very clever because they don't have tusks. They walk along the fence, they locate a suitable tree, and they'll push the tree over the fence and then they will go inside. So there's a very nice video actually, but sorry, it's not playing. I will not attempt to play it. Then low-tech solutions. Oh, okay, maybe. No, on my thing it was playing. It doesn't matter. It's just a very, very short video. This is in Masai Mara in Kenya, where my friend was doing this thing with the chili fence. It's a psychological deterrent, very low cost, not at a high cost. You take a rope, you take chili and you take chili powder and you take tobacco, mix it, put in waste engine oil, and then just apply it on the fence. But do this only just before the harvest, because elephants can learn that this is nothing. It's only a psychological deterrent. And just 1 month before the harvest, you put it in. But no, you can't run this over tens and tens of kilometers. You can do it on a very small scale, small farms and so on. You can do it. It keeps the elephants away just during that harvest period. Maybe after some time we need to do research. It gets used to the smell of this. So maybe you should change the nature of the chemical during subsequent years so that the memory is not there. That this is. Then we use high-tech solutions like radio collars. We put GPS collars on elephants, and even on a mobile phone. Even now we are tracking elephants in Assam and Odisha and so on. So this is a GPS collar. You can track the movement of these elephants, and you can give in near real time. You can give the information to the wildlife officials and to the local villagers. This elephant is coming, but still you have to deal with the elephant. The GPS collar does not prevent the elephant from entering a village or a... So when we do management, there are cultural dimensions to conflict. Lord Ganesha, in Andhra, reverence for the sacred elephant largely rules out culling of problem elephants. In Africa, an elephant steps out of a national park, can be shot. Legally, it can be shot. In India, an elephant kills 10 people, you cannot kill an elephant. Okay, because of our reverence for Lord Ganesha. And animal rights welfare people also place a lot of obstacles to the capture of problem elephants. I've been taking the softer option. Let's not kill elephants, let's capture elephants. But today, even that is coming up with a lot of resistance, a lot of irrational kind of resistance, unfortunately. Because through our history, we have actually captured elephants for our use. That's a different matter. And I always say that, I don't know whether this is a slide I should say this, that Lord Ganesha is a deity born out of conflict. Why do I say this? Look at Lord Ganesha, look at the broken tusk. How does an elephant break its tusks? When it's in combat with another male, right? With another male. So look at the pot belly. How do you get a pot belly? You eaten too much of food. Yeah. So Lord Ganesha, if you really look at Lord Ganesha, it's a deity born out of conflict. But that's a different story, which I will not elaborate upon here. Now the irony of India, I said to Western audiences, elephant has died. It is in conflict. It has died. People go and worship it. Okay. So how do we kind of, in some sense, come up with our own model of conservation that takes all these sentiments into account, yet be effective in trying to resolve conflict? It's not that, Africa, they'll kill it and they will eat the meat and go. Western country, the moment a mountain lion, even kind of tries to chase a biker, the ranger will go immediately shoot it and then throw the carcass away or whatever. But we don't. We give all due honors to an elephant or a tiger or anything of the sort. Now, we have had this ancient tradition, Pasupati seal from Harappan times, horn figure. We don't know who the significance of this. You have 4 creatures. You have the buffalo, you have the rhino, you have an elephant, and you have the tiger. Okay, there's no lion in Harappan times. And elephant first became sacred in Buddhism. In Queen Maya's dream, sacred white elephant descended from heaven and entered a womb. Clay tablet from Bharut, and so on. And Bodhisattva as a white elephant. That's the Buddhist thing, which is Ajanta painting of 5th century. It's my favorite painting, elephant painting of all times, lady. And I already said there's a deity born out of conflict, Lord Ganesha. Lord Ganesha is only about 5th century. It's about 1500 years. Prior to that, you don't have the Lord Ganesha figures. And the earliest Lord Ganesha figures that you will find is about 5th century, from the Kushan period. There are social dimensions to conflict. We talk about corridors to connect. Now, it has to be done in a socially sensitive manner so that to minimize displacement of people. You can very easily say, all of you get out of this place. People have been living for centuries in these areas, tribals, agriculturalists. So we also need to take economic cost benefit into consideration, not just come up with the Great Wall of China, so expensive that, it's totally disproportionate to the amount of conflict. So the way that conflict and the management has to be in tune with the local situation. These is maps and so on that we have done showing where the corridors are and and so on and so forth, and how do you strengthen these corridors in these landscapes. So landscape. The next is the culling, capture, relocation of individually identified rogue elephants. This is somewhat controversial, but the Karnataka High Court appointed a task force 2012, and I was the chair of this task force to suggest solutions to conflicts in some parts of Karnataka, and they accepted our suggestion that elephants can be captured and kept in captivity. Otherwise, prior to that, they were not allowing it, and High Court permits capture based on our recommendations for the first time. So we have broken some ground into the judiciary in terms of telling them the only practical thing in this area, elephants are far away from the forest. They have no business to be here. Let's capture them and keep them in captivity. Maybe you can relocate these elephants back. In some cases it works, sometimes it doesn't work. This elephant captured in Badra, brought to Bandipur, released, and some months later, you see it in Mudumalai, it is integrated with the herd. But then many elephants, like this one male was caught here, brought and left here. After 6 months, he's gone back there. So it only works about 30% of the time. 70% of the time, relocation does not work. But I'll give you some examples. So in our history, if you look at the history of the elephant culture in India, it is the use of elephants in armies in the subcontinent from the Mauryan to the Mughal. Chandragupta Maurya had 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 elephants in his army. In fact, when Alexander, called off came into India, won his battle against King Puru or Porus, his soldiers refused to advance any further because they heard rumors that once they come to the Ganges, more powerful kings with far greater numbers of elephants were waiting to confront them. So they were already shaken up by the use of elephants. They defeated Porus, but they did not. So maybe the elephant saved ancient India from total subjugation by Alexander of Macedonia. But that apart, over thousands of years, we have captured and we have kept them. This is a Chaturangani Sena, 4 divisions, 4 foot soldiers, chariots, cavalry. Chariots disappeared quite early. Cavalry is horse-based, and elephant is the infantry, and you have the foot soldiers. This is a Hoysala architecture, 13th century. You see elephantry, you see cavalry, you see one chariot somewhere, one chariot here, and then you have the foot soldiers. But then, so the earliest use of elephant in war is first millennium BCE. So we have had that long history. Now, I'm not saying let's go back and start capturing elephants in their hundreds of thousands, which they did in the past, but selectively a few elephants may have to come into captivity, which is something that we have to accept. And we can keep them in the elephant camps like this. Tapakadu, where elephant whisperers, got the Oscar that was shot in this camp. I first visited this camp in May 1971. It's been 53 years. And so I still continue to work in this area. And more recently, I just thought I should say something about genetics because, I've been talking about, and, in a lecture in memory of Professor S.P. Ray-Chaudhuri, I should bring in genetics in a small way. This is our most recent paper in current biology using whole genome sequences for the first time. I don't think even African elephant, they have used more than 30 sequences. We used more than 30 whole genome sequences, elephant blood samples collected all over the country, all the major populations. And what we actually found, there is a north to south gradient in the variation. North has the highest genetic variation, and you get a subset of that variation as you come south. That's why we call this divergence and serial colonization. A subset of elephants from the Himalayan foothills, Uttarakhand to Arunachal, colonized central India. A subset of that colonized north of the Palghat Gap in southern India. Subset of that. So each time you get a subset of the genetic variation that is there further north. Okay. So the elephant population, which is the extreme south near Kanyakumari, it's the lowest variation. And there are management issues, problems with low genetic variability. Okay. So you may have heard of Arikomban, the rice-loving elephant. I'm sure that Professor Mercy has heard about it. And it was captured. A lot of other political drama around it, but I'll skip all that. This is a picture from the BBC. Arikomban was taken from Munnar in the south and relocated very close to Kanyakumari in a place called Kalakkad. It is probably the best way of managing this troublesome elephant. This elephant was very troublesome, break into houses, stealing rice. Arikomban means one who goes and steals rice in Malayalam. And he was translocated to Kalakkad, and he was kept right in the interior. He settled down there. So there is a gene flow. So assisted gene flow. We can use these elephants that are captured in terms of assisted gene flow where we think. So more research on genetics and so on can play a role. Otherwise it's kind of very haphazard, unscientific kind of management that sometimes the wildlife people do. So something like this elephant was taken and put there, very good. So in one way. Population management through fertility control, because elephant populations increased. You have immunocontractives. It's been stayed by the Supreme Court of India. We'll have to see how to get that stay vacated. But that apart, it's actually used in African elephants to control populations, especially populations that are, moving around mostly in the human-dominated areas. Okay, so we need to bring and there are legal reasons why this has not yet been put into effect in the country, but we need research on this, and we need biology, we need reproductive biology, we need research on immunocontraception. See, An elephant, from our GPS studies, we dart an animal, we get it down, we put a GPS collar, and then revive it using a drug, and then the elephant is wandering around. This is in a place called Damdim in North Bengal. The tea gardens at the back. This is army land actually. And this particular family, she described an area. She used to go into Nepal twice a year to raid the crops there. Nighttime, on the Indian side, daytime on the Indian side, nighttime on the Nepali side, back and forth, she used to go. During twice a year. Rest of the time, she used to be on the Indian side. So about 1,000 square kilometers is the area. So like this, these kind of studies show what is a range an elephant needs, or a herd needs, or a bull needs. And therefore, we need to plan at the scale of landscapes. And the Karnataka Elephant Task Force, I told you, we try to define these 3 types of zones. Conservation zone with mostly intact forests. 90% of the state's elephants are here. Then there are areas where you have settlements within the forest and people have to coexist. But then most important, our recommendation was elephant removal zone. Highly fragmented areas, like South Bengal. Elephants have no place there. We have to remove them. But, today a lot of other factors try to prevent any elephant being captured and so on and so forth. Just to give you an idea, the elephants ranging entirely in these kind of areas, they have no place there and they should be removed. This is the conservation zone. This is the coexistence zone where there are settlements like this, like Wayanad, for instance. You have all the swampy areas being settled, and this is completely gone. It's all totally agricultural area, and elephants should be removed from these areas. And so we took this approach again 30 or 40 years ago. I was part of the first task force that came up with the design for the project elephant reserves or the landscapes in the country. These green areas are the elephant landscapes that we defined. And at the end of the day, you need to take a landscape approach. You need to look at the needs of the requirements of the elephant, requirements of people, the need to lower the levels of conflict. It's very, very imperative today. Today, every day people are talking about it. Yesterday, there was an India Today conclave on a panel discussion on wildlife-human conflict. I was sitting in there, and unfortunately, their timing went haywire. And I said, sorry, I had to leave for the airport. I came without talking. You can go back and maybe listen to the other panelists on that. I didn't speak on this occasion in Bangalore. So conflict, wildlife-human conflict. I've only given the example of the elephant. You have the wolf, you have the bear, you have the tiger. Tiger, especially in the south, where populations of tigers have increased a lot. We have to be scientific. At the same time, we have to be practical and we have to be pragmatic. We have to, through our research on genetics, we need to understand how much of genetic variation is necessary to maintain a wild population. From a demographic angle, population dynamics, mathematical models, we need to see what are the minimum population sizes that are viable for survival in the long term. We need to look at conflicts, we need to look at sociology, social scientists, we need to bring all these different disciplines together and ensure that both wildlife and people can survive and coexist to the extent that is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sukumar. Ordinarily, such memorial lectures do not follow up with question-answer session, but I'm sure this was such an exciting narration of events that some of you might want to ask questions. I mean, many of you can do it when we are taking tea, but if there are some urgent questions that you want to ask, we will still take a couple of questions, and I hope you won't mind answering them. So don't need that for the question.
Yes, I just need to.
So if there's anyone who's wanting to ask a question now, give the mic. Manchika, give the mic.
Why negative animal life? Absolutely.
Oh, it's simple ecology. If an elephant were to be a carnivore, you know the different concept of trophic levels in ecology, no? When you go from primary production to the secondary production, to the tertiary, you lose 90% of the energy is lost. So if you take let's say the production of paddy or maize or millets or whatever, and then you feed that to cattle, 90% of the energy is lost and only 10% is retained when you go to the next trophic level. It's a very, very simple concept in ecology. Now, what happens is, if you have a very, very large bodied animal, which is a carnivore, the amount of meat production that it will require for survival will be so much that the whole ecological system will collapse. It will never be able to produce that much. So that's one of the reasons why very large animals are only always herbivores. It's just that kind of production that is needed for their sustenance and long-term survival is just not possible in just simple ecological terms. So that's one of the reasons, since you asked this question, I must also mention that in the context of climate change, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the most energy-intensive foods that people consume is actually beef. I'm only talking about not from any other angle, only from the ecological angle. It consumes far greater amount of energy than the next category of meat, which is pork or whatever, and then chicken and so on. And then, of course, the vegetarian diet is much less. So even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in our last report on land and climate actually has a whole chapter on this, where we say that we're not saying that give up meat eating. We're saying shift, give up meat eating to a certain extent. And that can actually help save the world from, global warming. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so we do understand the importance of the wildlife corridor and the connectivity in terms of ecological and the genetic factor. But the thing is, I think the human population is being increased, continuously increasing in India, and lots of employment is being done in the protected area. What is your view on the wildlife conservation overall?
It's good. Yeah, it's going down. In fact, if you look at India, if you know India's demography, except for 4 states, UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan, all other states have crossed what we call the demographic transition. You just Google demographic transition. There's something called the concept of the net reproductive rate, which is, a woman on average, how many children she produces. Okay. Now, 2.1 is the threshold below which a population will start declining. Above 2.1, the populations will be increasing. So if you look at India's demographic profile, you will find that the population increases are largely in UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh. There also the demographic, the rate of increase in human population has been coming down. You take the southern states, they have intrinsically declining populations because their rates have fallen to 1.7, 1.6. Kerala came down much below 2 a long time ago. So India's demography is actually undergoing a huge amount of change, and we'll level off eventually. But in the meanwhile, what we need to do is, that's what I'm talking about, landscapes. We need to plan for, human population is here. This is how it will grow. This is the infrastructure that is needed. You need to have protected areas. You need to have connectivity. You need to take landscape approaches and plan. Yeah. Thank you.
So
I think we will.
Last question. A student, yeah. Student. I'll take a question.
Thank you for addressing me as a student. I'm like to make this young. Thank you for your comment. But the thing is, I wanted to know that when you are saying that nowadays the male elephants are more coming into the peak where the human and pigs and conflict, and if they are overeating the processed grasses and all, not the wild ones, they are growing fatter. Then does that not impact the productive rate? In mammals, at least, when you are carrying more fat and you're changing your circadian rhythm, you're becoming nocturnal rather than the diurnal pattern. Only aspect rather than that is eventually getting selected.
See, it's been in the back of my mind for the last almost 10 years now. Do elephants that overeat, do they become obese? Do they develop diabetes? Do they have all kinds of other problems that human societies face? It's a fascinating topic for research. Anyone wants to come and work with us on that, please tell me. We can try to do research on it. But at this stage, we don't have an answer to it. This is both, not only the male doesn't matter, the female is very important. The indications are in the short-term demography that female elephants that were producing a calf once in 4.5 years or 5 years are now producing a calf every 3.5 years or so. So the rate of reproduction has gone up because of the superior nutrition from the crops for the female elephants. But there are a whole host of issues that we need to look at.
We will stop.
Yeah.
I have one
Thank
question from your cheese because
Sure,
she wants to
please.
ask, but a short question and a short answer.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Sukumar, for your very fascinating talk. I come from communication sciences background, and more of a comment with a add-on question perhaps, which is that usually we associate elephants with the trumpet sound for communication, but we know that between these flocks or some groups of elephants, they communicate with infrasonic, also because it transmits further and across the groups they can communicate that way. Does that have any relevance to the kind of dynamics that you see in these populations that are
A lot of dynamics. In fact, our latest paper came out in Mammalian Biology just 2 weeks ago, is when the trumpet blows. It's essentially about trumpets. And we are trying to initiate work about how elephants use infrasound, especially the males, when they leave the forest and they come out into the agricultural areas. They're communicating with each other. In this, all male groups are forming, is larger, and they are communicating with each other. Okay. How are they communicating? At what frequency they are communicating? We're trying to initiate some work, but I can send you some papers on this. We have published several papers on this also. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Please do. Friends, it's time that I will request our chief guest to present a memento to Professor Sukumar in honor of his kindness of delivering this extremely beautiful lecture. So,